Today we're talking a little bit about organizational design, and specifically when organizations are going through a redesign of their efforts. This could be anything from shifts in their overall structure or roles or responsibilities. Maybe it's overhauls in their performance management system or compensation systems. Anytime that there is a major shift. A lot of times when people talk about a reorg, though, they are thinking about very fundamental shifts, maybe in the structure and the responsibilities and the roles in their organization. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to share some of the ideas that we've seen that work as best practices as leaders are going through these types of reorganizations. The first one is to think about the role of transparency in all of this. It always feels like the reorg never happens fast enough for the employees and leaders, many times, because of the ramifications of the potential reorganization, want to hold on to it for as long as they can. And so there's this difficult balance a lot of times. And I think being transparent about that is extremely important. I've seen the best leaders through organizations make the assumption that their employees are smart. I know that sounds a little funny, but they're smart people and they're going to figure things out. There was an organization we were working with who was talking about how they were moving to a more modern structure. And they continued to keep talking about it as the modernizing of the thing that they were doing. And when they rolled it all out, there were several different areas where it was very obvious that they were not really modernizing things. It was really just a way to try to put spin on some things. When talking to a few of their employees, a number of them said, okay, if the reason we were making these changes was because of these shifts in the cost structure and some of these things, we might not have liked it, but we probably would have liked even more that the organization would have treated us as adults and would have shared that versus putting this thin veil of modernization on it. Another aspect, I think, of transparency is what's the right level of transparency that you share during a reorganization. I don't remember where I first heard it, but the idea of there's almost like 3 buckets of information, I think, applies here. When someone's asking you questions about what's shifting or what's changing, being able to think about, okay, the answer to this question is probably either something I don't know, and it's all right to admit that, and then what you're going to do to go find that out. It could be something where you do know the answer, but you are choosing not to share it. And I think that's also important to be able to say, we do know, or we have a hunch about this thing. We're choosing not to share it because. And not only, again, does it honor the first thing that I mentioned of honoring the humanity and the intelligence of the other person, but I think you're also helping in that moment that person on the receiving end to sort of almost expand, almost practice growing their business acumen a little bit, because there's likely some rationale or reasoning behind why you're choosing not to share it. And then, of course, there's that third bucket, which is, yeah, I do know, and we are going to share. Here's what it is, or here's when we're going to be sharing that information. Another aspect of a reorganization that is important is to remember that you're shifting the system, the structure, the strategy, whatever it might be, because something fundamentally is shifting, or you have a hunch that you're trying to get ahead of something else that is shifting. Oftentimes, a lot of the conversation stays at the practices level and the shifting. Hybrid work is a great example, and even how that changed some team formations or team makeups. If your practices are shifting, it's primarily because there's also some beliefs that are shifting. And typically it's because if you continue to follow the ladder of inference down, there's some new reality or some new facts that we're choosing to interpret in a new way that is shifting our beliefs and therefore shifting some of our practices. And I think more leadership teams need to spend time working on understanding what are those beliefs and what are those assumptions that are being made, and how did maybe they serve us in the past, but they don't serve us as much going forward, and therefore we need to shift some of those, and this is why we're going to move to it. A good example of that is thinking now we need maybe not just a project management office, but maybe we need a continuous improvement office, or we need an innovation department or an innovation team. You can spend so much time doing the best practice searching and finding all the things on the what you could do or how you might do it. But spending time of the why now and how our beliefs have shifted actually is more important, because it kind of gets to my next point, which is you're almost never going to get it right in the reorganization of whatever systems that you're changing. And that's okay, because I think there's actually more value in the progress of a shift in the organization than there is of like nailing it and getting it right. And that's really hard because you have to acknowledge that you're in one paradigm and that paradigm is starting to fade in terms of its usefulness, and you need to shift to a new thing. But there's actually greater value in understanding that it's all just a paradigm. And again, you're not going to probably get it right to the next one. I've seen in some very large Fortune 500 organizations that it seems to be, every 5 to 7 years, there's a shift, right? Maybe it's a matrix that was originally oriented towards markets, and now it gets reoriented towards value streams or products or services. And it feels like it's a pendulum sometimes. There's a lot of energy and momentum that is used in that movement to say, and now here is the right way to do things. And yet, the greater value is understanding that it's actually that movement and that overall progress is likely more valuable than you chose and you landed on the right thing. It's a similar belief and experience that we've seen in the value of experimentation within organizations, whether they're experimenting with new product ideas or services, or even applying some of the innovation sciences to experimenting with new human systems. There's great growth that happens in not only saying, here, this is how we think we can serve people better, but also there's value in the practice of trying to move towards that. Because even if the guess, the hypothesis doesn't play out, you still have had the reps of being curious and trying something new, and then either seeing it succeed or seeing it not fail on a mass scale and realizing it doesn't hurt as badly. Like all of that underlying practice actually is what accumulates over time into great growth. And I use that word in air quotes, while at the expense sometimes that it feels like the actual thing itself, the structure change or the work change maybe didn't end up in the way that you thought it would. And chances are 4 to 5 years later, someone's going to come along with a different idea or approach of where that could go.